What's up, brosif? So, I bought Greg Doucette's training manual. I did actually buy it. I dropped $199 on this. I've actually had a few people send me this book for free, but I still bought it because as a content creator, I don't think it's right to pirate things or try to get stuff for free on the internet. Plus, I have gotten a lot of value from Greg's videos, and so I thought it would be right just to actually buy it. So, in order to maybe, potentially, possibly get my money back, I thought I would compare his book to my book and see which came out on top. In order to make my money back, I will need to sell 40 of my own books because it's on Amazon, it's $8, I make $5 per copy. I will need to sell 40 books in order to break even. So, it might happen, who knows? So, you open the book, and there is Greg Doucette in all his shining manly glory, shirtless, and staring at the camera like, holy shit. That alone is obviously worth the purchase price. You scroll down, it says, like, this book is protected by Canadian law, blah, 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 don't buy it if, blah, 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 or you have to buy it, don't distribute it, etc. So, I'm happy I actually bought it. Otherwise, I'd be in jail, obviously.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Then it has a health and legal disclaimer. Basically, if you snap your shit up, it's not Greg's fault, which is fair enough. Then we get to the table of contents, and I'll put it on the screen. I'm sure he'd be okay with me at least revealing the table of contents. And it has introduction, mindset, cardio, diet, weight training, and then it has casual, moderate, and hardcore plans. Now, the way I set up my own book was first by body part, then by exercises, followed by programming, equipment, special exercises, special workouts and techniques, so, manipulating reps, going beyond failure, etc. Then talking about cardio, then a section on injuries, then some sample training plans, and then also how to adjust your plan in order to keep making progress, followed by a section on strength standards, an FAQ, an appendix, and all that good stuff as well. So obviously we structured the books a little bit differently, but there is a lot of overlap in content. By the way, this is going to be 100% my honest opinion. I think a lot of channels, they like to suck up to bigger channels. They don't really say exactly how they feel because they want to be featured on Greg's channel. If Greg makes a video about someone, obviously it's great exposure. Honestly, I would rather just say exactly how I feel rather than saying like, oh, the book's amazing, when I don't actually feel that way. I'm always going to be straight with you, the viewer. If you're a Greg Doucette fan, realize I am also a Greg Doucette fan, and I'm just trying to be as honest and impartial as possible. So, scrolling through the book, first it has a section on about Greg Doucette, which is cool, but I already know most of that from his videos, just background information. Has a message from Greg, which is nice, not really at all that useful. Why do I do this? What is this book about? And then it finally has some of these red pages. It's a red page, it has a bunch of quotes from him. Honestly, I think this is just filler. Usually it's quotations from his YouTube channel, like, train harder than last time, or curls not for the girls, don't cheat on your girls, cheat on your curls, that kind of thing. And, it's cool to see in the book, but also it's not particularly useful, and it sort of just adds filler to the book. It's roughly 15 to 25% of the book, it looks like, and so I think it's really just to bulk up the book and make it seem bigger than it actually is. Then he has a section on mindset and motivation, which I think is really important, and I didn't actually go into in my book. So, point to Greg, ding sound. I didn't really go into motivation or consistency in my book, but I think they are both very important. He talks about how motivation is natural, it's normal. We like to do the things we like to do, and for him, going to the gym doesn't require motivation. For me as well, it takes willpower for me not to go to the gym, because I want to go. And I think, as a beginner, you just have to get into the gym and start focusing on the process, and eventually, hopefully, you'll come to love doing it, and it won't require any kind of motivation or willpower to keep doing. Then it has one of these red pages saying literally exactly the same thing as the previous page. It's a quotation of the previous page. I mean, that's about as filler as it gets. He talks about gym intimidation, not being intimidating. I can't say intimidated by. Motherfucker. Not being intimidated by other people in the gym. Holy shit, that took so many takes. You have no idea. I'll edit this out. But I think it's important to run your own race and not compare yourself to other people excessively. A little bit is okay. It's normal. It's human nature. But especially with steroids, if you're natural and you're comparing yourself to people on steroids, it is just not going to be a healthy place mentally. And you have to realize, if you're natural especially, there are some things you just can't do. And, I appreciate him saying that. I think it needs to be said more in the industry. And he's one of the few people who actually puts that out there. And I think that is a good thing, and he needs to put that out more, and more people need to put that out more as well. So then he has a short section on cardio. I think it's maybe 7 or 8 pages. It basically goes into why you should do cardio, how to plan your cardio. He mostly seems to suggest doing incline walking on a treadmill, which is fine. That'll get the job done. He doesn't talk about high-intensity interval training. He doesn't really talk about heart rate monitoring, I think. And overall, it doesn't really go into a ton of detail. It just says, how to arrange it in your program, which is good, if you should do fasted cardio or not. And, it's a good brief section on cardio, but I don't think it really compares to my section on cardio, which we'll get into right now. So my section on cardio goes into high-intensity interval training as well as low-intensity steady-state training. It talks about sprinting on the track, on the roads. It talks about, running on the treadmill, hill sprints, prowler pushing, sled dragging, cardio machines, doing lifting, using lifting as your cardio, which is actually viable in some situations, doing various complexes. So when you have the barbell and you're doing a bunch of movements in a row without rest, this is a very popular way for Olympic weightlifters to get in their cardio. Not that they do that much anyway. It also talks about various protocols. So Tabata, 10 or 12 times 30 seconds on or 30 seconds off, a bunch of other protocols as well. And then also how to track it. So checking your heart rate, checking your pace, your effort, and exactly how to decide whether to do low intensity or high intensity, the comparisons between the two, and then also, why you should maybe not do medium intensity steady state in that middle zone where it's not as effective for most people. Next, he goes into diet for a whole 1 page and 2 paragraphs, which obviously isn't a ton. It's not the main focus of the book, which is fine. It's more than my book has. My book has almost nothing on diet, I think. That'll be a different book, which I write later. But, it's good to have, I guess, just talking about calories. Pretty basic stuff, nothing revolutionary here, which is completely fine. All right, so now let's get into the weight training section. So he talks about the health benefits of weight training, obviously very, very important, but I think a lot of people know that already. He goes into how to choose which of the training plans that he gives out. He talks about periodization, which I think is very important, sustainability, how to take a long-term approach, a little bit about warm-up, the tempo of lifting, whether you should lift slowly or explosively. Both are good, but for different reasons. He talks about rep range, which is also good. He says to do 12 to 15 reps for hypertrophy and 12 to 20 for warm-ups for hypertrophy, which I think is a little bit high, but obviously you can still gain muscle in that rep range. For strength-focused training, he talks about 8 to 10 reps is going to be most sets, and then 5 to 8 reps on some of your heaviest sets. I think there's nothing wrong with doing triples or sets of 5, nothing wrong at all. If you look at most strength athletes, most very accomplished powerlifters, they're going to do a whole bunch of work in the 3 to 6 rep range, or even doubles or even singles sometimes. So, if you look at Shaiko, if you look at Smolov, if you look at a lot of how the Russian weightlifters train, the Russian powerlifters as well, they do a lot of low reps. Not the whole year, not all the time, but enough where you can't just say 5 to 8 reps is going to be your heaviest sets. If you want to truly maximize your strength, you should be periodizing, you should be peaking, you should be tapering and building to a lower reps, finally to a 1 rep max in a competition, which is maybe beyond the scope of this book, fair enough, but I think it deserves mentioning. Then he has a section on intensity, and typically speaking in the scientific literature, I'm sure he knows this, he has an MS in kinesiology. Typically speaking, intensity is just percentage of 1 rep max. So 90% intensity is just 90% of your 1 rep max. So if your 1 rep max is 100 kilos, that is just 90 kilos. That is 90% intensity. Whereas intensiveness, or how hard you are pushing, that is a completely different thing. And he seems to sort of mix these up in this section. I don't know if this is just to make it simple for most people, but typically speaking, when you hear intensity, you think percentage of 1 rep max, and then in this section, that's not what he's defining it as. So for me, that's a little bit odd. So in my book, Sweat, I go into sets and reps, I go into volume, intensity, actual intensity, frequency, I go into how to assess yourself if you're beginner, intermediate, or advanced, which I think is really important, and I don't think he actually went into. Often people think they are more advanced than they are, or they don't give themselves credit and they think they are not as advanced as they should be. I talk about, frequency, how to balance volume, intensity, and frequency. If one goes up, the others have to go down, and how to balance those in your program. Not all of them can be high at the same time, but if all of them are low, then you're training like a pussy. So, it's important to balance those and also to know which benefits you the most. Some people do really well on intensity. Some people do really well on intensiveness, going close to failure. Some people do really well on volume. Other people just get trashed from too much volume. Some people recover more quickly and thus they can use higher frequency. Other people, they might actually take 5, 6, 7 days to recover from a hard workout. So it really just depends. I go into how to train, how to choose a training split. So full body, upper lower, push-pull legs. And then also how to put it all together. So I really teach you exactly how to construct your own training plan, start to finish. It's just all laid out very, very clearly. An example of how to create a training plan, some sets, some reps, also talking about risk versus reward. Some exercises have a ton of reward, but also have a ton of risk. Other exercise, like a seated row or something, they have lower reward. They're not as stimulatory, but they don't have as much risk. So you really have to balance risk versus reward and stimulus versus fatigue, if you want to call it that, in your training. And he doesn't really go into this. I think it's important to, if you want to train yourself, if you actually want to train yourself, you need to be thinking about these things. Furthermore, I also talk about keeping a training log, what to write down, how much you should write down based on your personality. Some people really like tracking things. They like the data, they like the information. That's me, by the way. I'm a total nerd if you haven't noticed. Other people, they don't like tracking at all, and they should track the minimum. It is a lot of it is based on your goals as well as your personality. So track as much or as little as is appropriate for you. In his book, I didn't see anything about creating a training log or keeping a training log or what you should write down, and I think that is absolutely vital. He then has 3 paragraphs on advanced techniques and going beyond failure, which is not nearly as much as I have in my book. I have, I think, 15 pages about this. Manipulating sets, manipulating reps, when to do ramping, when to max out, when to do AMRAPs or every minute on the minute sets, rest pause, cluster sets, myo reps, DC training, whether you should do clusters. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in here. Drop sets, supersets, manipulating reps, when to go to failure, partial reps, isometrics, and he doesn't talk about any of this. Paused reps, these are all really, really good ways to get better progress, especially on more isolation or machine type of movements. If you're doing a bench press or a squat, you don't have to do any of this at all. It's just excessive. If you're doing drop sets and squats, Lord have mercy on your soul. I also talk about eccentrics and explosive reps. So much stuff here that he just doesn't go into at all. And I think it is a little bit, I wouldn't say lazy, maybe not covering something you should if you write a training book on weight training and you don't cover any of this stuff, which hundreds and thousands and maybe even millions of people have used for decades to get top results. You don't necessarily need to use these, but I think they can help for a lot of people. And that's why I covered them in my book. Then he talks about the rest time between sets, which I think is pretty much spot on. He gives, 1 to 2 to 3 to 5 minutes based on how compound of a movement it is and if it is strength or hypertrophy. And I think that's a good way to go. However, I typically just recommend go by feel. If you are not ready to go and the timer is buzzing, don't go. If you think you can go before that allotted 2 minutes or whatever, then feel free to go. It's important to go by feel, go by instinct. This is like sleep. You shouldn't be, asking some guru online how much you should sleep. This should be something you can just feel and know how much sleep you need. If you're tired, sleep. If you're tired, don't start the next set. Pretty simple stuff. He talks about progressive overload, which is good. Train harder than last time. He also gives a progression for how close to go to failure, which I think is really good. Some of that is a little bit too conservative. The conservative progression, week 1, is keep 6 to 10 reps in the tank, which that's a lot of reps in the tank. But the more moderate progression, he says 3 to 4, then 2 to 3, 1 to 2, and then go all out for real, which I think is pretty much spot on. That's basically what I recommend. Start your training cycle not so close to failure, but still with pretty good efforts. And then as the training cycle, the mesocycle, in science speak, goes on, you go closer and closer to failure. And then just before your deload, well, you're about to deload anyway, so you might as well go to actual failure or to maybe 1 rep shy on some movements. And so I agree with him on this 100%. He is spot on. Then he talks about how to select your weights when you're training. I think this is a good thing. He says to be more conservative at the start. That is what I also say. You want to start easier and build momentum during the training cycle. If you go all out the first week and your back is rounding on squats, or your elbows are flaring on bench, or you're just cheating on lateral raises, that's not really going to be effective, because where do you go from there? You need to give yourself a runway to build towards increased performance. If you're always training all out, 100%, every set to failure and beyond failure, you're going to run into a wall very, very quickly. So then he talks about when to change an exercise, and he says there is no need to change the exercises very much. For the most part, I agree. However, after 6 to 8 weeks, maybe 10 at most, for most of my clients, I suggest swapping some of the movements in and out. Stick with the basics, stick with compound movements, but you should always, at least for mental health, I think, switch up your training at least a little bit. Most people seem to get a little bit bored after 8 weeks. If someone is getting bored after like a week or 2 weeks, that's when I say, come on. You can't be changing your training every single week. This isn't fucking CrossFit. And, your training to a certain extent should be boring. On the other hand, if you are stagnating and you should change the exercises, I think that's a good idea, just to get a new stimulus. It's also good for injury prevention. If you're always training the same exercise, it's very easy to get injured because you're always stressing the joints at the same angles. Then he has a short section, a very short section, literally 2 paragraphs, saying if it hurts, don't do it, on injury prevention. In my book, I have a whole 10 pages devoted to this because I think it's really, really important. I talk about general strategies for staying healthy, including don't do stupid shit, don't go too heavy, don't go to failure too often, don't do excessive volume, don't become unbalanced. If your hips are becoming disaligned or your shoulders are jacked up, that is a very quick ticket to injury. Letting your form break down, also a very quick ticket to injury. Not listening to your body, which is more than just pain. Sometimes something doesn't hurt, it just feels a little bit off. That is also a big warning sign of pain. Sometimes injuries in weighting don't always hurt. It's just a stiffness or a tightness, or you're not moving the way you want to move. I talk about a lack of variation. I go into deadlift, squat, bench press, a bunch of other movements, dips, curls, etc., and how to prevent injuries on those specific movements. I think it's important to actually break it down exercise by exercise and how to prevent injury. Not just if it hurts, don't do it. People are paying $200 frickin' for this book, and the injury prevention section is literally 2 paragraphs. Come on.
Come on, folks.
Different body parts. If your wrist hurts, or your elbow hurts, or your shoulder hurts, or your knee, or your lower back, or whatever, what could be the actual problem? Because sometimes you don't know exactly what it is. All of a sudden your elbow hurts and you don't know exactly which exercise or which combination of exercises could have caused the problem. So here I give some typical culprits about what the injury might be. So for example, if your shoulder hurts, it could be upright rows, it could be cloak-off press, it could be wide grip bench press, could be low bar back squat, could be dips, could be anything behind the neck, could be Olympic weightlifting if you're going too heavy and you are not catching the clean or the jerk or the snatch correctly. Always catch the snatch perfectly. It's vital. And again, for the other body parts, I think it's good to look at injury prevention from an exercise standpoint, from a general standpoint, but also from a reactive standpoint. If something hurts, what could be causing it? So you sort of have to reverse engineer the problem. Then he has a massive half a page on equipment, really just detailing like straps and basic stuff. In my book, I go into this in pretty good detail. Essential equipment, so barbells, plates, dumbbells, squat rack. If you want to set up a home gym, I have you covered because I list everything in exact order of importance. So based on your budget, based on the money you have, your finances or whatever, you can select exactly what is going to be most important based in the order that I share in this section. It also talks about optional equipment to check to see if your gym is good or not. Some expensive gyms have fucking shit equipment. They don't have like preacher curl benches or pull downs or a trap bar, these really awesome machines or equipment that is actually really, really useful. I also talk about accessories, personal equipment like a lifting belt, straps, chalk, goes into full detail. This entire section is maybe 7 or 8 pages in full detail with pictures as well. That's another thing which I'll go into later. There is not a single fucking picture in his book. Not one. There's a front cover picture of him shirtless. There's a back cover picture of him shirtless. The middle, the meat of the book, if you will, has nothing. Not a single picture, not a single chart, zero. A zero, nothing, no pictures. Which for a book on working out is absolutely ridiculous. Greg Doucette, I'm calling you out. You wrote a book on training without a single picture. Come on, bro. Come on.
Come on.
Then we go into the exercise library, and I honestly think his exercise selection is 150% spot on. The big basic movements, deadlifts, a bunch of different varieties, pull-ups, pull-downs, rows. He has a bunch of different options for hamstrings. He breaks it down sort of by body part as well as by movement pattern. And honestly, in terms of the actual selection, there is a huge amount of overlap between my book and his book. And this shouldn't be surprising because these are the biggest, the most basic, and the most effective exercises that you can do. So honestly, if his book was totally different than mine, that would be a huge red flag. But because it's, 80 or 90% similar, that is a very good sign. However, again, no pictures, no descriptions, and if you're a beginner, this provides almost no value. It's literally just a list of exercises. It's a list of very good exercises. No descriptions, no visualizations about how to perform it, no equipment about what you need, no effectiveness, no comparisons, really nothing, no meat about these exercises. And this is the biggest difference between his book and my book. My book is $8, but it has 100 pages full of pictures with, I think, maybe 150 exercises. So roughly the same amount of exercises, but each one has, half a page to a page talking about how to do the exercise, some special tips and tricks, how to better feel the movement. And this is honestly lazy. This is lazy to get people to pay $200, myself included, for a list of exercises. Like if you're a beginner and you see bird dog or dragon flag or hollow rock, you have no idea what that is. I don't even know what hollow rock is. I gotta go look that shit up online when it's in a book I paid $200 for. That is crazy to me. That is crazy. I spent months writing my book and it's literally 25 times as cheap. That is crazy to me. He does have YouTube links to maybe 10%, perhaps 15% of the movements, but these are accessible to anyone. You don't need to buy the book to go check these out. So honestly, this alone is extremely disappointing. And Greg, you're probably watching this. You might not. I don't know. But not a good show in this section. You can't do a 2-day photo shoot and just take pictures of the movements. It's not asking that much. Next, he goes into his training plans. So this is basically the templates that you can use. He breaks it down into casual, intermediate, and advanced, or hardcore, or something like that. And they look solid, and as you would expect, he has a lot of experience doing this, both in terms of training other people and training himself, but also, from an educational standpoint. So they're on point, and this should be expected. No real criticisms here. Everything is laid out in a very logical manner. And yeah, I think you'll get results if you do these plans. Again, the price tag isn't really worth it. He says himself this doesn't really replace a personal trainer. And, you know, I think they're good, but again, the cost makes it sort of debatable. One thing I wish he would have gone into a little bit more, I also have training plans in my book. His are prettier to look at. The formatting is good. The aesthetics are more clean cut than mine, obviously. But you know, they're I think he has more training plans, and I'm not going to say they're better. I'm not going to like shit on my own plans. They're just different. They're a little bit lower volume. It's just a different approach to training. I think you can still get value from both. You can still benefit from both. One thing I think he probably should have gone into a little bit more is how to progress. Because you have this plan, and, you know, train harder than last time is a good motto, for sure, but it's not really all that detailed. You know, just train harder than last time. It's a little bit of just a cop-out in some ways, because the details are important. And so I do have an entire section, I don't know how many pages it is, maybe 20 or 15, about how to make progress, how to progress in weight, in load. If you can progress in other ways, so rest time, in tempo, sets, reps, how to make minor adjustments to your training plan. If something happens, what to actually do. We all know life is certainly not perfect. Shit happens, and when shit happens, what do? You know, how do you actually make progress when things aren't progressing perfectly? If you have great genetics, you might not have to deal with any of this shit. Just go in there, work hard, you'll do great. But for a lot of people, they might have to actually think about the details, because the details might actually matter to those people. So I have an entire section about how to make progress, about how to assess whether you should raise your volume or lower your volume or do some other change. And obviously this doesn't replace a coach either. It's not like I'm saying to my clients, you can all leave me and just buy my book. It doesn't really work that way. But I do think this is, you know, my book is a really good resource for those who can't afford real coaching and you want to coach yourself. You know, either his book or my book. Obviously my book is going to be 25 times cheaper, and honestly, I know I'm biased, but maybe a little bit better as well. Maybe. I know I just pissed some people off, but, you know, based on the data, the information, I think it's just a little bit better. And finally, I have an FAQ, strength standards, and an appendix. All of those total up to 30 pages of charts of frequently asked questions, of that kind of stuff, so even more value there. And you can pick it up on Amazon. I know this is self-promotion. I don't give a fuck. I just bought a $200 ebook, so I really don't give a shit if I promote my own book. If you get pissed off at that, you know, get a grip. Finally, this isn't talking shit about Greg Doucette. I love his content. I think he is a force for good in the fitness industry. However, I can categorically say this book is not worth $200. Just about all of this information you can find either on his channel or on my channel or in my book, which is 25 times cheaper, or elsewhere on the internet. There is nothing really magical in this book. I think it's solid. There's nothing wrong with the book. However, $200 is a lot of money to a lot of people. I dropped the money for two reasons. First, to assess it and also promote my own book. Full disclosure, nothing wrong with that. Second, because I enjoy his content and I want to say thank you for that. And I think that is the main reason why anyone would buy this book. If they like his content, they're a fan of Greg Doucette, I'm a fan of Greg Doucette, and they just want to say thank you. You know, thank you for the entertaining and informative content that he's put out. And, you know, $200 for the hundreds of videos and the insane amount of hard work that he has put in, to me, that's worth it. That might be, you know, a little bit different from the tone that I set during most of the video. You know, a lot of it was a little bit critical of the actual contents of the book, but it is not critical of Greg Doucette himself, because I think the fitness industry needs more people like him. Okay, so that is all for this video. Make sure to like the video if you liked it. If you disliked it, well, you know what to do as well. Feel free to drop a DL. Fine with me. I can't stop you. You know, do whatever you want to do. And subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Lots of awesome content. Sort through the channel. So much good information for you to delve into. And I will see you in that next video. Peace!